So welcome everyone. My name is Jessica Lorai. I'm the program director at the Interfaith Center at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. And at the Interfaith Center, our mission is to invite people from diverse secular, spiritual, and religious traditions to participate in one another's practices in order to cultivate appreciative understanding and friendship. We seek to unify people around common moral, social, and ethical concerns in order to build a more just and equitable society. So tonight I'm really happy to introduce our guest. Her name is Linda Mercadante, and Linda's going to be talking about spiritual but not religious. So SBNR is a abbreviation of spiritual but not religious, and this movement is the hottest religious news in decades. Although the US was once the most devout nation in the industrialized West, now religious affiliation is rapidly declining. In order to make sense of this, we will consider who are the SBNRs, what do they believe, and what might this mean for the United States. So Linda is a Distinguished Research Professor Emerita at the Methodist Theological School of Ohio and founder of healthybeliefs.org. She focuses on the intersection of belief and culture, especially in the spiritual but not religious movement. She's the author of 5 books and hundreds of articles, and her most recent is the award-winning Belief Without Borders, Inside the Minds of the Spiritual but Not Religious. As an internationally known speaker, she's been featured on NBC's The Today Show, the New York Times, WOSU, and many other media outlets. So I'm really excited to have Linda here with us tonight. And Linda, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can tell us all about SBNRs. Oh, you are muted, Linda.
I'm not getting I'm only getting my share screen right now. Can you take that off and just have it, all the faces? Can you hear me?
We can hear, we have it on speaker view. So when you're speaking, your image is the one that's visible, even though it may not appear that way to you. So, okay. Yeah.
Well, to me, I have my slides, and eventually when I'm done with them, I need to get out of shared screen. Sorry to start with business.
That's okay.
Okay. Well, anyway, thank you very much for the invitation. This is my specialty that I'm very interested in. And I want to start with us knowing a little bit about the country, because unless we know where we've been, it won't be surprising where we're going. And it is surprising where we're going. So I just want to clarify the U.S. situation. And in fact, America is still the most devout nation of the other industrialized Western countries, which, given the topic here, you would think, no, that's gone. But in fact, 36% of Americans say they get a great deal of satisfaction and meaning and fulfillment out of their religious practice. And for Blacks and Hispanics, it's very high. It's about 75%. So you might think, well, then what's the big problem? I wanted to remind you, for starters, why people get so much satisfaction out of their beliefs. There. Okay, so these are the top reasons that U.S. adults give for attending religious services. You can see here, I'll use my cursor here. You can see that to become closer to God is very high on their list. So their children will have a moral foundation, to make themselves a better person, and for comfort in times of sorrow and trouble. So,
Linda,
yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We cannot see your shared screen.
Oh, can you, sorry about that. And that's all, and Jessica, that's all I see. How can we back out of that and then go back and unshare it and then share it? Can we do that? Because my computer is not cooperating here. Sorry about that. See, I just see my slides. That's all I see.
Okay. We don't have them showing at all. At the very bottom of your screen, do you see a green button that says share screen?
No, because it's not showing me any Zoom. I'm sorry to take up the business, but instead of Zoom, I'm getting just PowerPoint is all I'm getting.
I think just you can minimize your PowerPoint.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you will be able to see the Zoom, and there will be the option to share a screen, so you can share.
Okay. Right, I did that already. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Oh dear. I can't see. All my Zoom controls are gone. Sorry. Except for the video of myself. I'm really sorry about this.
That's okay.
Uh, see-
I've had similar issues in the past, and sometimes it's a need to update to the latest version of Zoom. It could be that. If you'd like, you can feel free to read them to us.
Yeah, well, I went out of it. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay. All right, well, I guess I'll do that. But you can see me, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so anyway, I was checking on why people attend services. And they do it to become closer to God, to give their children a moral foundation, and to make themselves a better person. And then, of course, comfort in times of sorrow and trouble. So that sounds good. That sounds like America. It sounds like shouldn't everybody be there? And in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, that is where the majority of the population were. Not a particular religion, but religion, organized religion. But now the numbers are declining. And I have a chart here that you would probably be very interested in if you could see it. But at any rate, in 1940 and previous, about over 70%, more like, I think in the 30s it was even higher. But anyway, it was about 73% were church members. So maybe more went, but they were members. By 2020, it had dropped to 47%. So from 73 to 47 is a huge drop. And it's, for statistical purposes, it's not that long of a period. So that is a huge decline. Now I wanted to show you a slide about America's changing religious landscape. And if I could show it to you, you would see that in 1970, about a huge percentage of Americans were in organized religion. And if you could see this line, it drops like this. So you can see that it goes down, down, down. And then the line for no religion starts out very low, and it goes higher and higher and higher, which is unexpected, actually. So America's changing drastically. It's just that people that are still sitting in the pews probably notice less and less people around them. But a lot of people that are not regular churchgoers or religion participants, they may not notice it. But it's very dramatic and, statistically speaking, a first-time thing for us in America. So the majority now are not affiliated. This is new. And churches are kind of panicking. I have a billboard up here that says, and it's put out by a church, and it says, "Not religious, neither are we," which is crazy because it's a church. But churches are going out of their way to try to find things they can do to attract people that are unaffiliated or that call themselves spiritual but not religious. But I can tell you from experience, it's not working that well. So churches are kind of panicking, really. They're trying lots of things, but they're not, unfortunately, working. Another slide I have is the percentage of each generation that is that are religiously unaffiliated. Now, I wish I could draw this for you, but anyway, the millennials the chart is from about 1990 to 2018, and the millennials start pretty unaffiliated, but their unaffiliation rises, which is amazing. That for pretty unaffiliated people, they got even more unaffiliated. As far as Gen X, they also dropped. Boomers dropped. The silent generation, that's the 1950s people, And the greatest generation is the only generation whose affiliation did not drop in the population. So for those people in the religious world, this is very disturbing. They know about it and they're upset. So what about gender? Are women more unaffiliated? You know, for a lot of years, people thought that women were more religious than men. And that is still kind of true. But you can see, well, you could see if you saw a chart, but you can't see it. Okay. That men started out less affiliated, but still fairly affiliated, and their numbers rose, and women's numbers rose right alongside theirs. There may be a 10%, 20% change in them, but they're both going up like that. So why, right? Why? Well, the Pew Research Center, which I really like a lot, it's an excellent research center, and you can go to Pew and look these things up. Anyway, they surveyed people, and they found the top reasons that U.S. adults don't go to services, and here's what they are. The top one was, I practice my faith in other ways. 37% of the unaffiliated said that. Now, this is including everybody, agnostics, atheists, everybody that's unaffiliated. We haven't come to spiritual but not religious yet, but we will. 28% said, I am not a believer. And 23% said, I haven't found a church or a house of worship that I like. So presumably those people might still be looking, but I don't know that that's really what's happening. So no matter what we say or how we explain it, the idea of no religion is dramatically increasing. Now, I wanted to break this down for you. Start with who there are religious people here still. We have a reputation in America for being religious. Yet the numbers are declining. And then the rise of the no religion people is very important. And then I'll get to spiritual but not religious. So why? Why are the no religion people, why is it rising? Well, first of all, let's bust one stereotype. It's not from people that are just easily manipulated, joining a movement, following a leader, going to a cult, even a political cult. That's not the main body of people that are unaffiliated. And although they are, although they're very anti-dogmatic, they aren't actually anti-religion. Many people see religion as a lifestyle choice, like, playing soccer or something, and it's fine if you want to do it, that kind of attitude. The increasing cultural and religious diversity we have in America is another reason why it seems like we have so many options. Why stick with one thing? Another reason is that our relative affluence and our real focus on freedom of choice has made people feel like, maybe I can do better. Let me look around. And then all of this is mixed into a context of democracy, pluralism, and consumer capitalism. And believe it or not, the unaffiliated, and especially the spiritual but not religious, are a real market opportunity for a lot of companies. All you have to do is go to Target, go into the sports equipment section, and you'll see yoga mats that are clearly marketed to a certain population. And that's Target, Go to a yoga studio and they'll be even more higher end and fancier and way more expensive. So what are other forces that are encouraging people to swim with the tide, to get on the train of no religion? Well, as you well know, there's political and cultural polarization right now. And, a lot of people blame evangelical Christianity for that. And so they're like, I'm not going to be part of that if that's what's happening, if that's what they're doing. That's a segment of our population. There's also the hyper-focus on personal freedom and individualism. And Jessica and I were talking about that last week when we had our conversation. And even though she and I have different approaches, we agreed that this is something in the U.S. that's really almost becoming a problem, hyper focus on personal freedom and individualism. And that shows up, unfortunately, in the vaccine controversy. People want to claim their own authority now, there's a lot of anti-traditional kind of thinking now. Like, if it's tradition, it can't be right, it must be repressive. So people want to use their own authority. And then finally, and I know you're well aware of this, everybody, we're in a culture of skepticism, doubt, and anxiety. And that, at one point, that would have bred religious affiliation, but for some reason now it's doing the complete opposite. So, just as a street cred kind of thing, I want you to know that I myself was once a spiritual but not religious person, and I wrote a book about it. It's called Bloomfield Avenue, A Jewish Catholic Jersey Girl's Spiritual Journey. I actually have a poster here if I don't knock down all my other things. You can kind of see it here. So you can get this book. You can get it on Kindle. You can order it from Roman Littlefield. It's very easy to get. So it's called Bloomfield Avenue, A Jewish Catholic Jersey Girl's Spiritual Journey. And I talk about how I went from being raised by parents of two different religions who did not practice their religion because they thought, well, if their religions don't approve of their love, then too bad. So forget the religion. So I was raised without religion, went through a big searching period, was sort of a proto-spiritual but not religious person, and then actually became part of organized religion, and I'm actually ordained now. But I see both sides of the issue. So I heard so many stereotypes of spiritual but not religious people that I decided this isn't right. I mean, I was definitely there, and the stereotypes that they're talking about, cafeteria Catholics, eclectic, all that, shallow, it didn't seem right. So I decided in my research to interview and to talk to people that were SBNRs so that they would have their own voices to speak. And I interviewed hundreds, and I wrote a book. And a lot of the things I'll be saying here are from the book. And I can't say everything in this book, so I encourage you to get a hold of a copy. Again, you can buy it on Kindle or on the publisher, which is Oxford University Press. And it's called Belief Without Borders, Inside the Minds of the Spiritual but Not Religious. I'm the author. Belief Without Borders, Inside the Minds of the Spiritual but Not Religious. And okay, this is a little bigger than you can see, but you can kind of get an idea of it. It's a really pretty cover, so maybe that'll help you identify it. So, okay, finally, now we're at the spiritual but not religious. They are an interesting segment of the population. It's large. It's about 27%, which is significant. It's really significant. When you consider that mainstream organized religious affiliation has dropped below 50%, this one's coming up. This one's, catching up to our tradition of affiliation, but it's now a new phenomenon of disaffiliation. Some people say, well, okay, so we have less Christians, less Protestants, but, other religions will take over. No, that's not what I find. Do you know that only 1% of Americans are Muslim? Now, by 2050, it'll grow to 2.1. That's still very small. I mean, Jews are even larger than that. They're like 2.2%. Buddhists, 1%. Hindus, 1%. Mormons, maybe a little higher. So it's unlikely that will take over from the decline. So who are these people? What's interesting about the spiritual but not religious is that they're like middle people. They're not totally against religion. They're not they're not against it. They think it's interesting. They share. They take things from it, but they're also not affiliated. They don't want to be affiliated. So what are they? Why do they call themselves this? Well, what they claim is, and I'll bet you there's a whole bunch of people here in the audience that'll say, oh, right, yeah, of course, that's how it is. Well, SBNRs say that religion is institutional, dogmatic, exterior, and unessential. So they say that's religion, but to be spiritual, that is personal and private and open and individualistic and core. And so they choose to not be part of institutional things with dogmas and buildings and budgets and all that. And they want to just house it inside their own hearts. And that's what they mean when they say, I'm spiritual but not religious. Now, there's a lot of religious people that would say they're spiritual and religious. And I hope that most people that are religious would say that, because the best of religion combines both, the exterior and the interior. So, what else can we learn about them? Well, they are often politically progressive. They they have sort of an anti-institutional bent, although they participate in institutions, they pay their taxes, they have families, they're perfectly normal as far as I can tell, as much as anybody else. But where I found that they're from all different parts of the population, they're different races, ethnicities, definitely intergenerational. Of course, more are young, more are millennial and below, but there's plenty of Gen X, baby boomers. That's a big source of SBNRs, baby boomers. But at any rate, spiritual but not religious people are everywhere. Everywhere. You can go, as I did, to a little tiny town in Minnesota, northern Minnesota, 90 miles from the Twin Cities, which is way up there. And you'll find a yoga studio. You'll find a bookstore with sort of new age things. You'll find all sorts of things that spiritual but not religious people would like. I thought it was just amazing. It's everywhere, in case you haven't noticed. I'm sure you have. Okay, so these are people in the middle ground. The thing that's the most interesting about them that I found is not what they believe, although that was interesting. It's what they agree on to not believe. And a lot of the things they agree on to not believe are things they identify with conservative Christianity. Now, if there's any more liberal or progressive Christians in the audience, of course, you'll say, wait a minute, I don't go with all that either. But SBNRs, especially those who either came out of evangelicalism or never had any contact with with Christianity, feel that these are things they decide to never believe in. One of them is exclusivism, which means my way or the highway. You know, you go my way or you're going to hell. They don't like that. They don't like the idea that there's absolute truth. They think truth is relative. They for some reason do not like the idea of a personal, intentional, involved God. Now, many of them will substitute the word universe where other people would use God, but it's a more benign, almost distant energy source. They do not like the word sin. They take a more modern therapeutic mentality that everyone is born good and there's no way that people were created bad, which is not actually good theology, but they think that's what Christians believe. They don't like the idea of heaven, and they especially don't like the idea of hell. However, most of them believe in an afterlife, which is quite interesting, and I've got a whole variety of beliefs that they have on that. They also have a wide range of beliefs, which you have to go to my book, I think, to read it because there's a lot of it. But they have certain views about transcendence and immanence. Transcendence meaning apart from this world, and immanence meaning in it. If they were strong on anything, it would be immanence, that the energy, if there's any kind of divinity, any kind of universe, the energy is in this world, not outside this world. What about human nature? As I said earlier, they believe everyone is born good and there is no tendency to, mess up. And if someone does mess up, it means they're dysfunctional, they had a difficult childhood and so forth. They have certain views about community, which is that lifelong commitment is not ideal. A revolving door is fine. Take what you like and leave the rest, that sort of thing. And then finally, as I said, there is a belief in life after death. So you might be thinking, maybe I'm one of them. Well, maybe you are, but it cuts across generations, but there's also types. What I found was that there were at least 5 types of SBNRs. They're not all the same, except in their beliefs, which is really amazing. In fact, a lot of the people I interviewed said they couldn't continue to go to church if that's where they were, because they didn't believe in the things I just mentioned, and they felt it would damage their integrity if they kept going and showing up and pretending. So they all believe that, but then there are different styles of SBNRs. And I think I'll mention that, talk a little bit about where are we going next, and then I'll open it up for Q&A. So they're not all the same. Here's the types I found. See where you fit, or your friends or family or your kids. Dissenters. Dissenters are those who just kind of have a bone to pick with religion. Like, maybe something bad happened to them, or maybe they just thought it was boring, or they found one facet that they hated and they decided they didn't want to stay any longer. So that was actually a small percentage. The idea that they're angry at religion did not hold up. Sometimes they couldn't care less, or they thought it was a lifestyle choice, and everyone's free to do what they want. But not that many had a bone to pick with organized religion. You'd think they were ones who were hurt. People in the church think, oh, we hurt them. I didn't find much of that, believe it or not. Not that that doesn't exist, but it wasn't a dominant theme. Then the group that was the largest, the type, was what I call casuals. These people are like, well, I'm a little depressed. I think meditation is supposed to help me. I'll try it. Or I'm kind of stiff. Let me go to yoga class. But, when they were done with it, or they couldn't afford it anymore, it was not really working, they moved on. These are casuals. The next group I found, much smaller, were the explorers, the spiritual explorers. They were a fun group, very interesting. They basically were spiritual tourists. They liked to visit. They didn't really want to live there. They'd try this, they'd try that. It was fun. It was amusing. They weren't committing. The fourth group are people I called seekers, and that was a pretty small group. That's a group that is, in fact, looking for a home in organized religion and just shopping until they found what they wanted. That was a pretty small group. And the smallest group were those I called immigrants. Those are people who, in fact, try to affiliate with a religion different from what they ever had before. And sometimes they found it really hard. I mean, to orient to some new faith, maybe it seemed a little exotic to them, or it was just so many new habits to start. I don't mean you went from being a Methodist to a Presbyterian. I meant you went from being like a sort of lukewarm Methodist to being a Buddhist and really trying to live the Buddhist way. One woman I interviewed said that she felt guilty because she still had an understanding of a God who intervened, and she said she was told at her Buddhist Sangha that wasn't okay, that wasn't a good belief, it was immature, it was childish, and she had to get rid of it. And she felt terrible because she said she wanted it to be true. So she was an immigrant, but she was having a hard time. So let me just wrap up here, and then we'll take questions. What does this mean for America? Where are we going? It's going to be a rough going because, as we can see in the news, last few months or year, more and more people are disagreeing with each other. At least at one time, America had kind of what they called a civil religion, where people go, okay, you should be honest, you should do this, you should do that, And although they weren't all coming from a religious place, people kind of agreed on these things. That is falling away. Diversity is ruling. Freedom of choice is ruling. People want to do things their own way, and that means there's going to be more disagreement. Another problem or change is that, believe it or not, religions have accomplished a lot of good things. Social services, food kitchens, clothing drives, all sorts of things. Religions don't just try to convert and get you, to give money. They actually perform services for the world, because that's the core of many, many religions, is giving. So with them dwindling, we'll have less of that. Now, is America going to let government do it all? That seems to go rub a lot of Americans the wrong way. So if churches aren't going to do it because they can't, because they're too small, and government is going to be prevented from picking up the slack, a lot of people are going to continue to fall through the cracks. And there's just a lot of social capital that organized groups provide. SBNRs tend to be somewhat suspicious of institutions, not really big on committing to them. They more believe in issues than institutions, which you might say, so well, that's fine, yeah, whatever. But actually, history has shown that institutions can accomplish a lot more than individuals. So we may find less organized help for such things as climate change, social safety nets, and so forth, things that we actually, maybe all of us see we need to deal with. So there are good things about the spiritual but not religious movement. It's freed up a lot of people. It's gotten people out from under sometimes the yoke that they really didn't want to carry. It's given people a sense that they can do whatever they want, and that's good. But it's also possibly going to be quite an adjustment for society, because America has always had strong and large organized religious groups. So I'm really sorry about the slides and all that, but hopefully I've piqued your imagination and your thoughts, and this will give you a whole lot to think about when you go back to your own practices. Okay, Jessica.
Okay, thank you so much for wonderful information. And we do have some questions in the chat here. Let's see, where should we start? We'll start with the first one as they came in. This question you may have answered. Patrick says, I self-identify as both spiritual and religious. However, my religious self does not depend on going to church. Do you see this trend of SBNR as a problem in society? And I think you've touched on that. Mm-hmm. But if there's anything else that you would like to ask Patrick, feel free to unmute yourself and clarify if you want to.
You better unmute me, because I'm losing I lost my Zoom controls.
Okay, you're unmuted, so you're good.
Good. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me respond very briefly to that. They say often that there are phases in unaffiliation. One is believing without belonging, which is, I think, what Patrick was saying. Statistics show that is a phase on the way to not believing or belonging. So it is very hard to sustain a faith without a community. And when people never align with a community, their faith tends to dwindle. It's kind of like running the car on fumes. And you need to be reminded, you need to see role models, you need to see other people, you need to be given opportunities to do things as a group. And so I think that is a large phase of people that are practicing without showing up somewhere. Of course, it's the pandemic, but without being part of an organized group. And I think that generally people, their faith declines, but it could take a long time.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. It seems that saying I'm spiritual but not religious is a kind of dialectic. It sets this up as an either or. I am spiritual or religious. And I'm coming from a place to say it's both and. I am spiritual and I am religious. And as I indicated, and I do sometimes go to church, but it's not something that I feel I have to do to get to enrich my spirituality. I just wanted to note that difference. There are two different models. One is an either or, and the other is a both and. And I don't often hear people say, yes, I am spiritual and religious. Did
Maybe
you
you
find,
missed, maybe you missed that part, but I did say that. Maybe weren't here, but I said that most religious people would say they are spiritual, and I
okay,
hope that religious people would say that because what we call spiritual now used to be called piety, and it was like as Wesley said, your heart strangely warmed, and so it really was meant to be the core of Christianity, at least organized religion.
great, thank you.
Okay, we have another question here. How are spiritual, not religious, finding spiritual community?
Good question. I did ask them about community, and what I found was that most people wouldn't mind finding a community, but they often said, I said, well, okay, good. What would it look like? And they said, well, everyone would be able to hold their own beliefs without being judged. And I said, well, okay, and have you ever seen a community like that? And oftentimes the person would say, well, no, because I want everyone to agree with me on this. And so a community does need some cohesion, and I think they just didn't want to be judged. But you need more than that to form a community.
All right, we have another question. How do we stay together as a country if individual freedom becomes so important that we can't live in community in which people will hold different religious and political perspectives?
Right. That's the million-dollar question. How do we stay in community? How do we stay together as a nation? That's the million-dollar question. In history, the very sad thing that brings communities together if they don't have shared values is catastrophe. And we're certainly facing catastrophes that not everybody appreciates yet. And that's not a great way to form community, but it does happen. And but a shared set of values and standards and beliefs is probably a lot easier way. I mean, it's hard, but it's not as horrible as a catastrophe to bring us together. Those seem to be the options right now, and I think we've overdone the freedom stuff. I mean, freedom is like an American watchword, okay, and everyone wants freedom, everyone wants choice, but you can take it too far.
Yeah. Okay, we have another question, and you answered this in. I think you answered this in a sort of a general way, but there's a little bit more specific question. To what extent did the Catholic Church's scandals play a role in the migration to SBNR?
Yeah, it played some role. People occasionally mentioned it, and I did have a lot of former Catholics, and I hate this word, but they call themselves recovering Catholics. I think that's unfortunate, but at any rate, for some, yes, that was very important. They lost their trust. But the thing is, lack of trust, cynicism, skepticism, that's everywhere. So people don't trust. I mean, that's common not to trust any institution now. So the Catholics were just one more in the line of things you're not going to trust. But it does make people want to turn away from organized religion. But I always say, well, hypocrisy, it's everywhere. It's human. So who knows if we picked up all the rocks, how many bugs and things we'd find underneath all of them. I think that's the human condition. And so is trying to be community with each other. That's part of the human condition too.
Yeah. I do have a question also about, as a teacher of the spiritual tradition that I'm a part of, I noticed that a lot of the folks who come to this tradition, which happens to be yoga, they are identifying as SBNRs. And I see a lot of students who come and they kind of bounce around from teacher to teacher, from lineage to lineage. They may, they may bounce around quite a bit. They may be gone for a while and then they come back and they identify as spiritual. And as a teacher, there's a necessity to remain on a particular path in order to get to the depth of it that actually is spiritual. So just having a yoga mat and throwing it down on your floor and doing postures on it isn't exactly a spiritual experience all the time for every person. And so you and I had talked about this last week, that any time that somebody is kind of picking and sampling, well, I like this about Buddhism, so I'm going to bring that in. And I like this about Christianity, so I'm going to hold on to that piece of my, what I grew up with. And I love this about yoga, so I'm going to bring all these things and kind of create my own spirituality. And my question is how all of these paths are a path that takes you from one place into the depth of the actual theology and in order to learn it. So if someone is sampling, are they getting to the depth of anything, or are they just kind of sampling and floating around the fringes without getting into the deep good stuff that happens if you stick with a path long enough, no matter what that path is?
Well, as we spoke before, I totally agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. And a lot of religions, you get sort of pop theology and pop ideas. And if you leave it because of that, have you really dug a deep enough well to find out what's in that particular faith? Most people don't. It's hard work. It takes time. It takes effort. But it's very rich and valuable. And so it's better, the saying is it's better to dig one well deep than just look on the surface for water. You probably won't find it or as rich of a vein of water unless you go deep. So even, let's say, I'm very, very familiar with Christianity, and people would say, well, Christianity is all about sin and anger and doom and gloom and a punishing God and all that. And I'm like, well, actually, I've gone extremely deep into it, and that's not what I find at all. So it's kind of upsetting when people want to write off a tradition that they barely explored. But if you barely explore a whole bunch of things, I think you're going to end up confused, exhausted, and probably end up not really committing to anything. So I don't, what is it that will grab somebody and help them go deep? It could be a wonderful teacher. It could be something they read. Some people never will do that. You just don't know. But what I find is that going deep takes a lot of work, but it's really worth it.
Yes, thank you for that. I tend to agree with you on that. So, and it's a lot of hard work and sometimes years of effort. And I encourage anyone exploring to keep that in mind. So let's talk about the question here from Christina. Can you talk about the Deconstructionists? Where do they fall under SBNR types?
Well, I didn't, that is maybe more of an academic field or occupation. And so I didn't find many people saying that they were deconstructionists or even aware of what that means. But if your main goal is to deconstruct, chances are you will not adhere or commit to something because you'll always be waiting to find out what's under it and whose self-interest is going to be served by unseen forces. And so it does foster more distrust and skepticism and cynicism, and that's a shame. I don't think the philosophers who started this tradition meant that. I think they meant for it to bring freedom. But a lot of times you'll see students come to a university or college with one set of beliefs, and they'll meet a deconstructionist perspective and end up without anything. And I heard a lot of that in my interviews, a lot. That doesn't mean college is bad. I love school and I'm a professor. Okay, so I believe in teaching, I believe in knowledge, I believe in all that information and all that. But if a person isn't going to go deep and get really rooted in something, they'll be easily shaken up.
We have another question here. There's a little preface to it, so I'll read that. Robert Bella called our attention to the loss of the language of the common good in his Habits of the Heart in the 1980s. Are not we moving away from all fraternal organizations and service groups? such as Masonic lodges, Lions Club, American Legion, etc. So maybe SBNR is just part of a larger move away from community organizations into a growing individualism. And it's phrased as a question.
I totally agree. And then another scholar wrote a book called Bowling Alone. Isn't that a great title? Bowling Alone? Because, you know, bowling was usually taking place in leagues, and very few people, unless they were practicing for the league, would go to the bowling alley and bowl by themselves. So that's just a symbol of the decline of organizations. PTA, all sorts of things. It's hard to get people to come out for things. And the pandemic has made it worse, really. But it was already a problem before the pandemic. And I think that is going to be difficult for the U.S. I think those groups were like glue. It's called social capital. It's the glue that would hold people together. And without the glue, we don't hold together very well.
Jonas has a question. Do you think that secular groups like Project Bread are helping to meet social needs in ways that make up for the decreasing capacity for religious institutions to do that?
I do think that those kind of groups, I know about Bread, those kind of groups are excellent. The Harmony Project, things like that. They can provide some of the substance that people got from organized religion. CrossFit. Some people just latch onto these things with almost a religious fervor, but that's not common. And so, and AA, that's another one that people really stick to. I think they do make up for it to a degree, but what's an energy of religion that isn't there in those other groups is a common source, a common divine source. And religions have it, no matter what they call it, even if they call it non-being or nothingness. I mean, there is some kind of energy that everyone tries to partake of. I don't think those other groups, the socially active groups, social activist groups are wonderful, and I'm part of many of them. I just don't think they have the holding power on people's hearts that faiths do.
Yeah, they seem to not have they don't present a worldview that followers or believers can kind of buy into, maybe.
Yeah, not only that, but sometimes the challenges they take on are so huge and so important that it's easy to get burned out when you don't see major systemic change. Because we want that for the better, for the common good. But if you just expect it and hope for it and work for it and you don't get it the way you thought, there's no recourse. Whereas in religions and faith, there is a larger power, a larger energy, a larger divinity that you hope has the common good at heart and will bring it about even if humans can't do it, or with human cooperation.
I have a question from Grant asking Catholic theologian Paul Knitter has written the book, Without the Buddha, I Couldn't Be a Christian. Right. How much of this kind of serious integrative spirituality have you found?
Well, I wish I could say I found a lot. He's a brilliant scholar. I know him and his work. He can do that. Most people don't have the time or the energy to even commit to one faith, much less go deep into two. If you can do it, and I know people who can, it's extremely enriching. And it brings together forces like of East and West that we often have trouble reconciling with each other. But the average person is going to have trouble doing that. I mean, I was raised, my mother was Jewish, my father was an Italian Catholic immigrant, my mother was first generation immigrant. And did I become a two religion person? No, I had to commit to one thing in order to grow. Now, I bring in elements of these other things, but it's hard to be two things at the same time. We're so limited. Humans are limited. But some people can do it, like Knitter, and that's brilliant.
Okay. Bill says, so to me, Christianity is probably an early victim of the cancel culture before it became a buzzword. What role do you think the government/courts have played in the decline of organized religion?
Well, that's a really big question. The country is dedicated to the separation of church and state. That's a strength. That's a good thing. When religion tries to overstep the bounds of the American Constitution, people get annoyed because they think religion doesn't have the right to impose itself on other people that don't agree or that are of different faiths. So I think the courts have been trying to preserve the separation of church and state, as they should, and I don't think that they've hampered the practice of faith. The Supreme Court, I think, is I hate to say this, but meddling a little more than it needed to. I think people were happier when religion tried to stay out of politics. And now you could have your religion and you didn't have to declare your politics at the same time. That, I think, has become a big mistake.
I have a question here. Why don't more SBNRs ultimately join liberal churches such as Unitarian Universalism or ethical culture, which seem to allow for a range of beliefs while still forming a unified community?
Right. Excellent question. A few years ago, I was invited by the leadership of the Unitarian Universalist group to speak to them before they had their general conference. This was when it was in Portland. And because they said, the SBNRs, they should be our people. And I said, you're right. They should be your people. You're perfect for them. But they don't want to be brought into an organized group. And to them, you look like a church. You got pews, you got, pulpit, all that. And they don't want any part of that. So I'm really sorry, because I think they'd be very happy with you. And I've taught many Unitarians. I love them. And, I agree with the UUs, but it's missing the boat of what SBNRs are really trying to profess, which is they're not interested in aligning with anything that's an organized religion, even if its theology is way more open.
Okay. Do you think political organizations get deeper into spirituality of some sort than religious organizations do, as they are having more participants than religious organizations do?
They are definitely having a lot of participants, and they're, organizing people, but I don't think they go into spirituality. I think they go into ideology, and ideology can unify people, but a lot of times an ideology has to have an enemy. And I don't think that's a good faith stance, is like, let's focus on the enemy and, doing the enemy in or something. Organized religion at its heart should be more about love and community and forgiveness and finding commonalities without having to completely agree on everything. Political groups, I think, expect a lot of discipline and agreement, and if you step out of line, you're probably not going to do well with that group. So I don't think they're providing spirituality. I really don't. Spirituality is like a love affair. It's of the heart, and the heart wants love. So I don't see political ideology giving you that.
Okay. Jeanette says, could you address the difficulty regarding moving from conservative Christianity's certainty to the struggle of not knowing?
Good question. Yes, it's an important transition. I know a lot of people that are in that transition. Certainty feels good, especially in a very uncertain world. But you can have a type of certainty even when you don't have to have absolute certainty about everything. And I don't think life really gives you absolute certainty, not this life anyway. So it is more of a struggle. But the thing is, when you have absolute certainty, you're pretty much walling yourself into a very small space. And everybody on the outside of that space is either a bad person, a heretic, or a challenger. And that's a hard way to live. It sounds like it'd be easier, but it's a little more immature. I hope people don't take offense at that, but I think a mature adult knows that we can't know everything.
Right. This question is, are there specific writers or influencers who are associated with SBNR?
Yeah, tons. Tons and tons. I can't even start naming them, but it'll be one popular book after another that people will say, oh, have you read this? And then they'll read it. And so there is a whole trend of new ideas, it's almost like you have to generate new ideas to hold that audience. And it is an audience and people are marketing to it. Just, appreciate that. We are in a consumer culture. So you need to go online and because there's just so many popular books that people just transition through. I don't know. It's just Oprah. Go to Oprah. She'll give you the books.
Thanks for that. That's a good answer. That's a really good answer. I like it. I had a question about your work, and when you started in this work, was it just purely research on your part out of your own curiosity, or were you diving in deep into this topic as a way to help people?
Well, as a minister, I always want to help people. That's my first and top goal. That's why I became a professor, because it's not the most lucrative thing you could do, nor is it the most popular thing to teach theology. People walk away and they, you meet them at a party and you tell them you teach theology and they're like, oh, wait a minute, I need to get something to eat. I'll be back. Then they're not. So it's not a popular thing to do. But I took that burden on 6 years to get a Ph.D., master's degree, all that stuff. It took forever, 13 years to get educated to do it. I did it because I wanted to help people, because I went through my spiritual but not religious phase. I went through I was an atheist for a while. I was spiritual but not religious for a long time. And when I finally just made the decision to commit to the thing that seemed the most reasonable to me, a lot of things fell into place. I felt like a whole person. And before I didn't know, was I Jewish? Was I Christian? Was I nothing? What was I? Things fell into place when I made a decision to commit, but I didn't commit superficially. I committed to go in deep. And so I was just hoping to help other people find something like that too. And if my students said they were unhappy because, for instance, let's say they were United Methodists, but they were gay and they couldn't come out and all that, I'd say, change, go become a UU, become a United Church of Christ. There's plenty of places that would accept you. So I wanted them to have something with depth in it. And that's what I've been aiming for all along. So most of my research isn't just out of curiosity. I researched spiritual but not religious because I was one, and I thought they were being misrepresented in the popular press and even in the church. I thought they were just not being given a hearing. So that's why I did it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Do we have any final questions? You can either type it in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to ask it live. It is 8 o'clock, so we're about to wrap up, but I don't want to miss anybody's questions here.
Maybe you could mention that I have a website, so if people want to read my blogs or they want to learn more, they could go to www.healthybeliefs.org. I have a Facebook page for Healthy Beliefs. I have a Twitter account. I use LinkedIn all the time, and I'm always posting new articles about this movement. That's my main goal, is just education, just sheer education, and helping people make some decisions in their own lives. And I also do, I'm a guest lecturer, I preach, I teach courses, so I'm available if you want to reach out to me. And my email is lindamercadante@healthybeliefs.org, and I'll be happy to take additional comments at that email site or on my website.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who is here. The Interfaith Center is offering programs almost every week now, sometimes 2 a week. And the next program we have is October 19th. It's called Living with Grief from COVID-19. So we'll be looking at societal grief as well as individual grief that comes from both death losses from COVID and non-death losses from COVID. And then on November 2nd, we have a program called Green Burial. So we're going to look into environmentally friendly burial options. And on November 9th, we have values-driven marketing with Kylie Slavic. So we'll be looking at conscious ways to market your business or your personal service for those people who don't like marketing. So I hope to see you all then. Thank you again so much for being here, and have a wonderful night.